My husband left our kids home alone, but denies it. Even after footage showed a woman visiting, he still refuses to admit the truth. My husband is 43, and I'm 31. We've been married for 7 years and have a 5-year-old and a 9-month-old. My husband left our children alone, and he refuses to admit to it or tell me where he was. I'm furious, enraged, and my husband keeps telling me I'm making a big deal about nothing. This just happened this weekend. I am on the board of directors for a local nonprofit organization. I had to attend an event for that organization this past Saturday, and I was gone for most of the day. My husband was supposed to be home with our kids. I texted him a few times, and he responded. When I called around midday, he didn't respond, but that's not very unusual. Shortly after that, I got a call from my mom. She said my son had just called her. When she asked him what he and his sister were doing, he said they were both watching TV. When she asked where their dad was, he said his dad wasn't there. My mom asked him several other questions, and from my son's responses, she believed he was telling the truth, that my husband wasn't there, and that there was no adult there at all. She said he didn't seem scared to be alone or worried about where his dad was. He just called her to chat. He has a tablet designed for children with pre-programmed contacts that he can call. It's only a few people, just family members. I left the event immediately and began texting and calling my husband repeatedly. He didn't respond to my first several attempts. It took him about 10 minutes to respond. I was halfway home at that point. I was so confused, so worried, really mad, and I asked him where he was. He said he was at home. I told him our son had just told his grandmother that he was home alone with his baby sister watching TV about 15 minutes ago. My husband denied it, and I told him I was too upset to talk and drive. When I got home, I checked on the kids right away, and they were both fine. I asked my husband again, "Where were you?" He said he was home the entire time. He didn't know what our son was talking about, but claimed he must have just been confused since he had gone to the basement to do some laundry. I ran down to the basement. It was the same load of laundry I'd thrown in the dryer the night before. He didn't do any laundry when I was gone. I asked my husband why my son would be confused about whether his dad was home or not. Where in our home would he have gone? And for how long? For our son to think his dad wasn't home. That doesn't make sense. With a 5-year-old and a 9-month-old, you wouldn't leave them unattended that long. Why was he nowhere to be found when my mom asked my son to go check certain areas of the house? I begged my husband to just admit it, to stop treating me like an idiot, and to stop accusing our son of lying. Just tell me the truth, I pleaded, because being lied to right to my face is so incredibly maddening. He insists he was home, but he can't come up with any believable story of where he was or what he was doing during that time. The way he answers me when I ask him about this and demand truthful answers is so dismissive. When I tell him, "You left our children alone," he quickly says, "No, I didn't." So anyway, he says I'm overreacting and letting our son's imagination drive me crazy. I am convinced he was gone. We don't have a Ring camera, but at least one of our neighbors does. I'm so upset about this that I'm tempted to ask our neighbor for the Ring footage. I had to go out to my car and scream and cry because I got so upset. Of course, I didn't want my kids to see my reaction. I can't put into words how upset I am about the fact that I know he must have really left them alone, but have no proof, and I'm being treated like I'm just a paranoid nutcase of a mother by him. Comment 1. When my now ex did this, it was drugs I didn't know about. He told me months later when I found out that he often left at night and put the kids in the living room together so, if the house burned down, at least they'd be together. My youngest was under a year, the oldest was 5. Don't stop asking questions. This gives me chills. Comment 2. I haven't seen it anywhere, but will admit I haven't looked super deeply. So I'll add this. This is not the first time your husband has left your children alone. Your son's reaction to grandma is proof enough of that. He was calm, completely unbothered by the fact that he and the baby were alone. He would not react like that the first time. Comment 3. As someone who was constantly left alone with her younger brother at such a young age, you are so right. Update 4 days later. Last weekend, my husband left our 5-year-old and 9-month-old home alone while I was gone, and then refused to admit it or provide a plausible explanation. Since then, we had many arguments about it. I've been living in a constant state of anger and frustration. I didn't want to fight about it anymore, but I couldn't help it, and I kept bringing it up again and again. I couldn't lay low and pretend to get over it while I waited for him to do it again and catch him in whatever was going on. I also knew that demanding he tell me the truth wasn't going to get me anywhere since he'd been refusing to talk and deflecting for days. All it was doing was making me enraged and feel like I was about to have a brain aneurysm. I told him to hand me his phone so I could check his location at the time. He refused. He said I wouldn't do it and that it was a violation of his privacy. He won't be treated that way and refuses to give in to my delusions. You think I enjoy being in a situation where I have to beg my husband to show me his phone so I can see where he is? I hate it. I don't want to live that way. I told him it's simple. If he was really at home the entire time, just prove it. Why wouldn't he want to clear this whole thing up? I got so mad that he wouldn't turn over his phone that I told him I was going to the neighbors to get their doorbell footage. At first, he was like, fine, go do it. He didn't think I actually would. He knows I don't like to air drama to others, so he probably figured I'd just swallow all of this crap he's been giving me. Luckily, I was totally being driven by anger at this point, so nothing was going to stop me from going to the neighbors. When I actually started to go out the door, he tried to stop me and followed me out the door. I felt pure anger rushing through my veins, nothing else. The neighbor, who I've probably said less than 10 words to in the entire time we've lived here, told me he'd send me the footage. I went home, told my husband that the neighbor didn't have the footage from that day anymore, and told him I just needed to go to the store and cool off. So I put the kids in the car and went and parked somewhere while I waited for the neighbor to send me the footage. I have the neighbor's number now too, and he told me if I need any more footage, he will be happy to give it to me. The video shows a blue car that I don't recognize show up and park in our driveway. A blonde woman gets out of the car and goes towards my house. She walks on the outside of our garage toward the gate leading to our backyard. The gate is too far back and out of the way to be seen on the doorbell footage. She and her car were there for 23 minutes. Imagine that. The car leaves right around the time that my husband called me to say he was home and had been home the entire time, as I was rushing home in a panic and calling him on repeat. One of two possibilities exists as to where they went. She either came in through the side door of the house, which does provide direct access to the basement, or, and what I think is more likely, they were in the backmost area of our yard, which is a gated pool area. Immediately behind our house is a grass lawn. Then you step down a few steps, and we have a patio. Then there is a fully gated area where the pool is. It's not like you think of when you picture a gated pool. It's a full 6-foot wood fence all the way around, plus even taller landscaping for added privacy. You can't see into the area at all unless you're inside. I think it's more likely that they were back there because my son said his dad's keys were gone, and we keep that gate locked with a key. The pool is closed for winter, but there is one small building back there, sort of like a shed we converted into a changing area, and there is a covered patio with furniture. I'm convinced that's where they were. So, technically, he was home, but in an area totally removed from the house, and where he couldn't see or hear the kids if something happened. I asked him how he could explain this. What were they doing? I obviously don't need him to tell me what they were doing, but for some reason, I still had hope that he'd finally be honest. He wasn't contrite. He showed no remorse. He was just like, yeah, she was here, but I obviously never left. Who is she? How long has this been going on? And if he's going to be such a disgusting, despicable excuse of a man, then why couldn't he at least have found any other time and any other lie or excuse other than when he was home alone with our kids? I told him I know this has happened before, and I demanded to know how many times he's done this when he's been home alone with the kids. He swears this is the only time, but he still doesn't have the balls to confess to what they were doing. I don't believe him that this was the only time. FYI, I still have so many questions, and I still feel like my heart is beating 200 times a minute. My blood pressure is through the roof. I've cried a lot, sobbed, begged for somebody to help me, yelled, screamed, ordered a bunch of books about divorce and custody. And you know what? The next day, after our multiple explosive fights, him putting his hands on me, and me seeing the evidence, he acted like everything was totally normal, like none of that stuff ever happened. I woke up still seething, exhausted, broken, and he's acting like everything is totally normal. He said he was ordering breakfast to be delivered from our favorite breakfast place. He asked if I wanted to go to the store together later and try this new recipe for chili tonight. What? Why would I want to do any of these things with you now? Absolutely no acknowledgement of anything he's done or what's transpired between us in the past few days. He deserved an Oscar for how well he was able to act like none of that happened, completely comfortable and nonchalant. I know that it's a waste of my energy, but I just desperately want him to admit the full truth of what he did that day and any other day with this woman. I want to hear it from him. It won't change whatever he's done, But he could at least have the respect and decency to be honest now that he's been caught. That's a ridiculous thought though, right? How foolish of me to expect this man to show decency and honesty now. If he was a decent and honest man, then he wouldn't have had a strange woman over to our house and been out of sight from our kids for 23 minutes. His continued denial and refusal to admit to anything other than the bare minimum, his attitude like I'm somehow being controlling or infringing on his rights by asking for information. That's almost more hurtful than him cheating on me. Comment 1. OP. He has not been honest and won't be honest. Even if he is, what would that give you? Could you even believe it? OP. You know what he was doing. You don't need him to spell it out for you. Put yourself and your children first. OP response. At the end of the day, him admitting to what he's done wouldn't really change anything. It certainly won't change anything he's done. It won't make it better, and I probably still wouldn't believe I was getting the full truth. Yet, I can't stop seething over the fact that he's refusing to give me any info. Comment 2. Because he is hoping that if he doesn't admit to it, there is a chance you will stay with him. He cheated. He endangered your children. He is selfish. Comment 3. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Unfortunately, you won't get anything from him. If I were you, I'd channel that anger into a plan to take your kids and leave. He will never say he left his kids in a dangerous situation to cheat on you. You know it's what happened. He knows it's what happened, and it will continue. Make no mistake. Story 2. Am I the asshole for getting a coworker fired after she repeatedly mocked me for my breast implants, unaware that I got them due to cancerous cells? Original post. I'm 28, and when I was 24, Mom died of breast cancer. After both of my nanas also died of it, I got some tests done and found that I did have some potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. The doctor said I could either wait and see if they did turn harmful, or I could get ahead of it and get a double mastectomy. I got a double mastectomy. I was warned about scarring but not the extent of it, and ended up with scars 1 inch long and ½ an inch wide on my chest. I hated the way it looked. It got to the stage where it was having a serious impact on my mental health. I felt sick seeing myself, and I wouldn't leave my flat. I went to a therapist who did some CBT with me before she suggested seeing a plastic surgeon about scar reduction. The plastic surgeon said the scars could be hidden with implants. I was naturally big, an F cup before the mastectomy, so I opted to go with slightly smaller but still fairly large DD-sized implants. They hid the scars pretty well, and I'm happy with them. My mental health improved, and I felt comfortable in my own skin again. A few months ago, I was at work having lunch with this friend of mine, and we were planning a holiday. She made a joke about my boobs exploding on the plane. The friend knew me before the surgery, and I knew she wasn't being mean, so I laughed. A coworker, Jill, overheard and, not knowing about the cancer thing, told everyone that I'd had a boob job. She hated me from then on out, and she made a bunch of jokes to other coworkers, calling me fake in 2 ways and more plastic than Barbie, all when I was in earshot. I've asked her to stop more than once. We were all having lunch today, me, Jill, and a few others. A coworker, Bob, was talking about his daughter wanting to marry this guy who has nothing going for him, and I said that Bob was being a little shallow. Jill replied, "Well, you'd know all about being shallow," gesturing at my chest. I'd had enough and said, "Do you know why I have these?" A few years ago, the doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get a double mastectomy by a doctor and was left with huge, ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist and cosmetic surgeon who advised me to get implants to hide the scars, and I did just so I could look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first. Feeling like that was a mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. Someone from the lunchroom came to talk to me, saying Jill was just joking. I was being oversensitive and an asshole about it when Jill didn't know about the cancerous cells. I replied that maybe Jill shouldn't have been an asshole to begin with. It's the end of the day now, and half the office seems to side with Jill and the other half with me. Relevant comments. Comment 1. NTA. Jill shouldn't be commenting on her coworkers' bodies. This could easily be seen as sexual harassment. Edit. OP. Please mention to HR that you repeatedly asked Jill to stop commenting on your body and she refused. I don't see this ending well for Jill since she continuously commented on your body and pushed you to the point of feeling uncomfortable in the workplace. OP response. I don't have any record of it. I only ever spoke to her about stopping in private. The 4 times I asked were in the lift twice, the stairwell, and the women's bathroom, all places without cameras. So the only person who can confirm I asked her is Jill herself. I can prove she's been making comments about my body by asking any coworker she spoke to, but can't prove I asked her to stop. Edit. HR wants to see me about creating a hostile work environment. So looks like someone reported either me or Jill or both. Update. HR wants to see me tomorrow, so I'll update after work. If they're dealing with it quickly though, it can't be good. Update 2. Some coworkers have offered to write me letters of support for HR tomorrow, basically saying that they've seen Jill harass me completely, with rough dates and times. Relevant comments. Who filed the HR complaint? OP response. Wouldn't be surprised if it turned out Jill was the one who reported me. She has a friend in HR. Commenter. Would it count as sexual harassment? She has a friend in HR. If the note is from that friend or the meeting is with that friend, I would try to go over her head as fast as possible, perhaps initiating a counterclaim. Not sure if that is the right term. You may want to ask over at our/legal advice or our/legal advice UK if you are in the UK, as someone else guessed. OP response. I am in the UK. The email is from Jill's friend, so it looks like the friend will be overseeing the complaint. But there's something in my contract that basically says if HR ever gets involved, I have the right to an unbiased overseer and can request a different one if I can prove the current one is biased. So if it is this woman and I can show she and Jill are friends, then I might be able to fix it or go above her head. Update. For the rest of the day, I had about 1/3 of my office come up to me and offer support, and the rest tell me that Jill was just joking around and I was being an asshole. I replied that Jill was being an asshole long before I was. I then got an email from HR saying they wanted to talk to me the following day. When I called for clarification, they mentioned a hostile work environment. Note, this is apparently an American term and holds little weight in England, but it's what was said over the phone. I knew the person who signed off the email. Her name was Debbie, and she was Jill's friend in HR, so I was fairly confident on who had reported me. I realized that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting my information. As Debbie had dealt with me so far, it was safe to assume she would be the person reviewing the complaint with me, and if that was true, I was in trouble. However, I vaguely remembered a section on complaints that was in my contract when I first signed with the company. I flicked through the contract, and there was a part in the complaint section that said I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my allocated reviewer was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I photocopied the page and highlighted that part. Then I messaged the people who had offered their support over Facebook and said, basically, HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face? And are you willing to write and sign something saying what you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, as Jill is somewhat feared in the office due to her befriending HR and management, but about 20 people were willing to help me. I guessed roughly when I'd asked Jill to stop previously, the 4 asks over the last few months. Some timings were easy to guess as they'd happened on my break or when I'd first arrived at work. I wrote them all down, along with a rough time of when the lunchroom confrontation happened and a list of names of who was there for the lunchroom confrontation. I got to work slightly early the next morning. I went round everyone who had messaged me, and most of them managed to give me a printed and signed letter. Some didn't manage to write one, but NBD. This isn't exact words, as there were 16 letters to sum up here, but the gist was, my name is their name. I work with Jill last name and OP. On date at time approximately, I spoke with Jill last name, during which she referred to OP as quoted insult. I felt this was inappropriate as it directly related to OP's appearance. And I'm willing to go on record further to establish that Jill last name has been discussing OP in the workplace in the same manner for 3 months now, causing me discomfort and creating what I feel is a hostile work environment. Signed their name. I ended up with about 16 letters, all from different people, and one of them was in the lunchroom for my conversation with Jill. Some even had bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or other people. As it turns out, Jill has issues with a lot of people's appearances. She apparently made comments about one coworker's weight and something anti-Semitic about a different coworker's nose, all of which were put in these letters. There are about 45 people in the office, so while 16 wasn't a majority, it's still a decent amount. The letters weren't hugely long. Most were only a paragraph, but they had all the necessary information. I was asked to come to HR at 10 a.m. I took the letters from coworkers, the photocopy of the page in my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there, and Debbie was the one overseeing the interview. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the other HR worker that was currently there and said, "So, is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I replied that this wouldn't sit well with me. As my contract states, I have a right to an impartial overseer. As I said this, I took the contract page out of my folder. Debbie read it. I wouldn't let her take the paper when there was a shredder so close by. She said she could be impartial. I replied that I really didn't mean to be a pain, but I had it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend, and my contract does say I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Debbie stomped off to get her supervisor. The supervisor asked how I know she can't be impartial, and I told him that I have it on good authority that Jill, who was on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. He asked Debbie if this was true, to which she only replied, "I can be impartial." The supervisor took a deep breath, asked the other HR rep to come with him, and the four of us all went to review the complaint. I thanked them for being so accommodating. I was worried I'd annoyed them. Debbie took out the complaint, and all three of them went through it with me. Debbie looked homicidal the whole time the interview was happening, as she had clearly anticipated firing me, or at least recommending me being fired. The interview went something like this. It took over half an hour, and they kept asking me the same questions but phrased different ways. So this is a really drastically condensed version. Question: you said outside that you think Jill last name reported you. Why is this? A. Jill has had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Question: why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue? A. I had no issue with her. Question: what issue does Jill have with you? A. For years ago, a specialist identified potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I had surgery to remove my breast tissue, thereby removing the cells and the risk. After the surgery, I was left with large scars on my chest. I went to a therapist for low self-esteem and depression. The therapist suggested a plastic surgeon who suggested breast implants to cover my scars. All of this is in my medical history, which you have a copy of in my file, and my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants, but didn't know about the cancer. Jill had a problem with my breast implants and decided to communicate this problem to our coworkers. Question: why do you feel this is true? A. Here are 16 signed statements, all from different coworkers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office I'd had breast implants on the day she found out, and has since made comments about these implants frequently. They have quotes of what Jill said to them about it, in rough days and times. Question: rough dates and times? A. No one knew this would be escalated to such an extent, so no one really took notes, as and when it happened. Question: what event or events do you think directly led to this complaint of harassment? A. For me, harassment began when Jill told everyone about my breast implants without my consent. But as to the complaint placed against me, it would probably be what happened at about time yesterday in the lunchroom. Jill made a comment about me being shallow while gesturing to my breasts, and I replied by giving her an abridged version of my relevant medical history and ending with a comment about the importance of getting the full story. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll be able to find that conversation. I'll admit I could have handled the situation better, but after 3 months, I felt I had to put my foot down. Here's a list of names of people who were also present. There were 6 people at the table, including myself and Jill. One of these people is also in those letters and has written their account of the conversation and signed it. Question: had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments about you? A. Several, spaced out over the last 3 months. Each time, I communicated to her that I felt uncomfortable and upset with these comments she was making and would appreciate it if she were to stop. Question: to your knowledge, was Jill made aware of your former cancer at any point in this time? A. No. It wasn't mentioned in the conversation with my friend she overheard, and I didn't tell her because, frankly, it's none of her business, and I did not feel the need to detail my medical history to a coworker in order to avoid further sexual harassment. The supervisor stood up and said, "Well, I think we're done here." He shook my hand and sent me back to my desk, saying that I'd hear from them after they reviewed the evidence. Letters, CCTV, medical history, and anything they had already, and made a decision on the case. I got back to my desk, pulled up my CV, and prepared to start the job search again. About an hour went by, then the person who wrote the letter and was there for the lunchroom conversation got called for a meeting with HR. They came back 10-ish minutes later. The other people who were also there for the lunchroom conversation got called one by one, except Jill. All of them were gone for about 10 minutes, then came back. Then, the people who wrote letters but weren't there yesterday were also called one by one, and were each gone for about 10 minutes each, some longer, some shorter. By about 3:30, it looked like everyone who wrote a letter or was there in the lunchroom had been interviewed. Then finally, Jill got called in. She was gone for about 30 minutes and came back fuming. She glared at me while I worked, but I ignored her. Around 4:30-ish, Jill got called into HR again. 5 p.m. rolled around. Everyone was either leaving or getting ready to leave when Jill stormed back into the office. She glared at me the whole time she packed up her desk. She then started telling anyone who would listen that I got her fired before shoving her way onto the lift. An email came in from HR. My case was closed. TLDR, coworker harassed me over having implants, which I only got because I had cancerous cells. I called her out. She reported me to HR for calling her out. I got a bunch of people to write statements of all the times she harassed me, and she got fired instead. Also, I've been told that isn't what a reverse Uno is, but I can't change it. I just want to add that regardless of my reasons for getting implants, I still should not have been harassed over them. It just happened to be relevant here because it made Jill look like a real dick, which is probably why she reported me.